The Galaxy Council mocked at cowards among us. Then the war commenced. The ceasefire request came from the Velthari Dominion on the 14th day. It was not dramatic. There was no ceremony or formal broadcast. A Velthari communications vessel crossed into neutral space near the Kepler boundary, broadcasting a white signal flag on the old standard frequency that had meant the same thing across the galaxy for 3 centuries. "We want to talk." The vessel was met by a human escort frigate within the hour, guided politely to a neutral waypoint, and held there while the message was relayed back to Sol. Hyun read the message in his office. Then he called Dane. Dane had been back on Earth since the bow. He had watched the 14 days unfold from a desk in the Diplomatic Corps building in the city, reading the incoming reports, monitoring the council channels, tracking the slow ripple of consequences that spread outward from Haven Station in every direction. He had barely slept. He had eaten very badly. He felt fine. When Hyun called, Dane read the Velthari message, set the pad down, and looked at the window for a moment. "They want to negotiate," Hyun said, on the call. "I read it. Do you want to lead the team?" Dane thought about Counselor Mira's message, which had been sitting in his inbox for a week. He thought about the 31 people killed on the Arna Belt transport. He thought about the 12,000 people who had been imprisoned on Briva Station for months while the council did nothing. He thought about Governor Ori's voice on the channel, rough and exhausted. "We thought no one was coming." "Yes," he said. The negotiation was held on a neutral platform midway between human and Velthari space. A small station that had been built for exactly this kind of meeting and used very rarely. Dane arrived with a team of 6 diplomats. The Velthari delegation was larger, 12 representatives, their chief negotiator, a senior official named Rak, who was visibly unhappy about being there and made no attempt to hide it. The first session was tense. The Velthari came in with several preconditions: partial acknowledgement of their right to expand into the contested territories, compensation for the damaged vessels, a mutual de-escalation framework that would essentially freeze the current positions. Dane listened to all of it carefully, without interrupting. He asked no questions during the Velthari presentation. When they were done, he set his notes aside and laid out the human position. No recognition of territorial claims made through military force. The contested territories would return to their pre-conflict status under free space law. All imprisoned civilians on Breva Station would be released immediately and returned home. The Velthari would fund the repair of Haven Station from their own resources. In exchange, humanity would release all Velthari prisoners, all 460-some crews, fed and treated and unharmed, and return the disabled vessels once their weapon systems had been permanently deactivated. There would be no war reparations beyond the Haven Station repairs. There would be no annexation of Velthari territory. There would be no trial of Velthari officers for the initial attacks. Rock stared at him across the table for a long time when he finished. "You are not asking for territory," Rock said slowly. "No," Dane said. "You are not demanding reparations beyond the station repairs." "No." "You are not—" Rock stopped. He seemed to be having trouble processing something. "You defeated 9 of our fleets. You could be asking for much more than this." Dane folded his hands on the table. "Yes," he said, "we could." The silence stretched. "Why aren't you?" Rock asked. It came out almost like a genuine question, like something he actually wanted to understand, not a negotiating position. Dane considered how to answer that. "Because we are not trying to punish you," he said. "We are trying to end this. There is a difference." He paused. "If we take your territory, you spend the next generation trying to take it back. If we demand payments you cannot meet, your government collapses, and whoever comes next is angrier and less stable than you. If we put your officers on trial, your military sees it as humiliation and plans revenge for the rest of their careers. He looked at Rock, steadily. "We want a peace that stays peace. That means the terms have to be ones you can live with." Rock was quiet for a very long time. Outside the viewport of the meeting room, the stars were still and cold. Somewhere on the other side of that darkness, 4,000 human warships were waiting. "Our leadership will call this a defeat," Rock said finally. "It was a defeat," Dane said. "We are not asking you to pretend otherwise. We are asking you to accept that it is over." The negotiation took 6 more days. There were points where the Velthari delegation pushed back hard, and Dane's team had to hold firm without being aggressive, which was a balance that required constant attention. But the framework held. The terms did not change significantly from what Dane had laid out in the first session. On the 7th day, both parties signed the Haven Accord. At Verath Prime, the council session that followed was unlike any Mira could remember. Dane arrived with the signed accord and presented it to the full chamber. He walked to the center of the same room where he had been laughed at, stood in the same spot where he had been told his species was too soft and too kind to survive in this galaxy, and he laid out the terms of the ceasefire clearly and without drama. The chamber was very quiet this time. When he finished, he stood and waited, the way he had before, patient, still, giving nothing away. It was the Dravani delegate who spoke first, and what he said was not a question about the terms. He said, "We did not help you." "No," Dane said. "And you came back here anyway." "The accord requires council registration," Dane said. The Dravani delegate shook his head slightly. "That is not why." Dane looked at him for a moment. Then he said, "We still believe in this council. We believe it should work. We believe that civilizations that choose to talk instead of fight are worth supporting." He paused. "We did not ask for your help because we needed it. We asked because asking was the right thing to do. That does not change." Up in the observation gallery above the chamber floor, Lieutenant Yuna stood beside Admiral Isul and watched the session below. They had both come to Verath Prime for the formal registration. Hyun had thought it appropriate to have military officers present, a visible reminder if one was needed, though the session seemed unlikely to need reminding. "They still don't fully understand it," Yuna said quietly, watching the delegates below as they absorbed what Dane had presented. She could see it in their faces, the continued processing, the slow shift of assumptions, the careful recalculation of things they had been certain about. "They're still trying to figure out how we did it." Isul watched the chamber below. "They're looking for the trick," she said. "They think there has to be something hidden, some reason the terms are so reasonable that it's actually unreasonable. Some advantage we kept for ourselves that isn't visible on paper. Is there?" Isul almost smiled. "The advantage is that we mean what we said, that's all." She watched Dane standing calmly in the center of the chamber, fielding questions, patient and steady. "They'll figure it out eventually. They'll watch us over the next 10 years, 20 years, and they'll see that we actually do what we say we're going to do. And slowly, they'll start to understand that that is not common. That is not something most civilizations manage." Yuna was quiet for a moment, looking down at the chamber below, at the 52 species that had laughed, dismissed, and forgotten about humanity for centuries. "Do you think they'll ever admit they were wrong?" she asked. Isul thought about it. "Some of them already have," she said. Mira sent Dane a message. "I don't know what it said." She looked at Mira in her seat below, watching Dane with an expression that was hard to read from a distance, but was nothing like the expression she had worn the last time they were all in this room together. "I think she knows. I think a few of them know." She stepped back from the railing slightly. "The rest will take time." Yuna nodded. She looked down at Dane one more time, then out at the stars visible through the high, transparent ceiling of the chamber. Somewhere out there, Haven Station was being repaired. Breva Station's 12,000 people were going home. The Velthari disabled fleets were being prepared for handover, their crews already released, already traveling back to Dominion space. The war had lasted 14 days. The peace, if they were careful and patient, would last much longer than that. "What happens now?" Yuna asked. Isul looked at her. "Now," she said, "now we go home. We keep building." A pause. "We stay patient." Yuna nodded slowly. She looked back down at the chamber one last time. The session was winding toward its close. Dane was answering the last of the questions, calm and thorough, the way he had always been. The accord was going to pass. The peace was going to hold, at least for now, at least for long enough. Everything was different than it had been 2 weeks ago. The galaxy had learned something, was still learning it, slowly, working through what it meant. Humanity had not changed at all. That was, in the end, the whole point. They had been exactly who they had always been, kind where they could be, firm where they had to be, patient always, through the laughter and the dismissal and the long dark years of quiet work. They had never pretended to be something they were not. They had never let what others thought of them become what they thought of themselves. They had just kept going. And when the moment finally came, they had been ready. The Galaxy Council mocked at cowards among us. Then the war commenced. The news reached the Galaxy Council in pieces, and each piece was harder to understand than the last. The first report came from a Thurok commercial vessel that had been operating near the Kepler boundary. Its captain filed a routine log that mentioned unusual electromagnetic readings consistent with mass fold-point activity in the Haven Station sector. The Council's communications office flagged it as a minor anomaly and passed it to a junior analyst who put it in a queue. The second report came from a Pelori Deep Space Observatory. Their long-range arrays had detected a gravitational disturbance consistent with several thousand simultaneous fold drives. The number in the report was so large that the observatory director had assumed it was an instrument error and included a note saying so. He filed it anyway. The third report was not a report, it was a transmission. Open channel, broadcast on all frequencies, no encryption, addressed to every council member and every registered civilization in the Varath network. It came from a human vessel. It was from Captain Teo. Counselor Mira was in her private chambers aboard the Orenthi diplomatic cruiser when the transmission arrived. Her aide brought it to her on a datapad with an expression that Mira had never seen on the young man's face before, a kind of careful blankness that meant he was not sure how to feel about what he had just read. She took the pad and read it herself. She read it twice. Then she went to the Council Emergency Channel and called an immediate session. The chamber on Varath Prime filled within the hour. Every delegate was present, either in person or via secure projection. The transmission was displayed on the main screen for all of them to see. Teo's words were plain and direct, without drama or performance. He had simply opened a channel to the entire galaxy and spoken clearly, the way someone speaks when they want to make sure they are understood and have no interest in being misunderstood. He said that humanity had not fired first. He said that had never been in the plan. He explained that the Velthari had crossed into free space, destroyed civilian property, fired on a civilian transport, and now occupied a civilian colony by force. And that Earth had documented every single incident in full, with evidence, and had presented that evidence to the Council 3 times, and had been dismissed 3 times. He said that humanity had therefore defended itself and others, as any civilization has the right to do. Then he said the part that made Mira's hands go still on the arms of her chair. He said that in the 72 hours following the engagement at Haven Station, 9 Velthari fleet groups operating across the outer territories had been neutralized. He described the method. Every strike had been coordinated to disable, not destroy. Engines removed, weapons neutralized, life support left intact. Every Velthari crew taken prisoner had been processed according to standard detention protocols and provided with medical treatment. Every Velthari vessel with wounded aboard had been boarded by human medical personnel first, before anything else. And then he said, "We did not fire first. We do not glass planets. We evacuate civilians before we strike. We treat prisoners according to the rules we agreed to follow, even when our enemies do not. That is not weakness. That is not cowardice. That is the difference between a species that fights to destroy and one that fights to end the war." The chamber was very quiet when the transmission ended. Mira looked around at the other delegates. She saw the same expression on every face, a kind of slow recalculation, like a number they had been certain of had just turned out to be wrong. And now everything that had depended on that number had to be reconsidered. She thought about what she had said to Dane in this same chamber not long ago. She had said there is no shame in being peaceful, and she had meant it as dismissal. She had looked at humanity's record, the funerals, the medical ships, the laws against cruelty, the refusal to destroy inhabited worlds, and she had read it as proof of weakness. She had seen their patience and called it timidity. She had seen their restraint and called it inability. She had been wrong. Not about the facts. The facts were exactly as she had described them. Humans did hold funerals for their enemies. They did send medical vessels. They did refuse to glass inhabited worlds. All of that was true. She had been wrong about what it meant. What it meant was not that they could not fight. What it meant was that they had chosen, deliberately chosen, over centuries, with full awareness of what they were giving up and what it might cost them, to fight in a way that preserved life wherever possible. They had built rules for themselves about how to conduct war, not because they were too soft to break those rules, but because they were disciplined enough to keep them. That was not cowardice. That was something harder than cowardice. That was control. The Thurak delegate spoke first, his voice slow and careful. 9 fleets in 72 hours, he said. That is... He stopped. Started again. How many vessels is that total? Approximately 460, said the Dravani delegate, reading from the display. All disabled, none destroyed. Human casualties were light. How light? The Thurak delegate asked. 11 wounded, no fatalities. The chamber was quiet again. Mira thought about the Velthari. She had always been careful around the Velthari, in the way that powerful civilizations are careful around each other, respectfully, attentively, never turning your back entirely. The Velthari fleet was large. Their weapons technology was proven. They had fought and won 3 major wars in the last century. Nobody in this chamber had ever seriously considered that a single engagement could neutralize 9 of their fleets. She also thought about the humans. She thought about the things she had said. She thought about the laughter. She thought about Dane walking to the door and turning back one last time to say, "We are not peaceful, we are patient." She had thought it was a line. Something a diplomat says to save face. She had not taken it seriously. She understood now that it had not been a line. It had been a description. Simple, accurate, and completely literal. They had been patient for 30 years, building in the dark, making no announcements, asking for help they knew they would not receive, doing the work anyway. They had been patient while being laughed at. They had been patient while being dismissed. They had been patient while people called them cowards to their faces in this chamber, and they had gone home and kept building. The discipline that required, the years of it, the sustained effort of it, the refusal to act before the right moment even when provoked, was not something Mira had expected. She had expected a species that made peace to be a species that could not make war. She had never considered that they might be 2 separate abilities, and that a civilization could be very good at both. Later, when the session broke for a recess, Mira stepped out onto the observation deck that looked out over the dark space beyond the station. She stood there for a while, alone, looking at nothing in particular. Her aide came to find her after a few minutes. He stood beside her in silence for a moment, then said, "The Velthari command has gone quiet on all channels since the Second Fleet was disabled." "They are thinking," Mira said. "What do you think they are thinking?" Mira was quiet for a moment. Outside, the stars were distant and cold. Far beyond what she could see, 4,000 human ships were still out there, holding position, maintaining order, processing prisoners, treating the wounded, following their own rules in the middle of the war, because they had decided those were the rules they would follow. "I think they are thinking," she said slowly, "that they made a very serious mistake in their assessment." Her aide nodded. He hesitated, then said quietly, "Did we make the same mistake?" Mira did not answer right away. She looked at the stars for a while longer. "Yes," she said finally, "we did." She went back inside. There was a great deal to discuss, and she suspected that some of the most important conversations this council had ever had were about to begin. But more than that, she had a message to compose. It was not a formal communication. It did not need to go through official channels. It was addressed to Delegate Dane of Earth. She stared at the blank message field for a long time before she wrote the first word. She was not sure what to say. She was not sure sorry was the right word, or even enough of a word for what needed to be said. But she knew she had to start somewhere. She wrote, "I believe I owe you a conversation." She sent it before she could change her mind. Across the galaxy, the disabled Velthari fleet sat silent in space, their crews alive and cared for, their ships intact. And the human fleet held its position, patient and steady, waiting for what came next. As it had always been, as it would always be. The Galaxy Council mocked at cowards among us. Then the war commenced. Haven Station was not a military installation. That was important. That was the thing Hyun had told his commanders to remember, and the thing he repeated now in the briefing room, aboard Seoul Defense Command, as the alerts came in. Haven Station was a civilian colony, 9,000 people, mostly miners and their families, farming communities on the lower rings, a medical facility, 2 schools. It sat at the edge of free space near the Kepler boundary, far from Earth, far from the inner colonies. It was not strategic in any traditional sense. That was exactly why the Velthari had chosen it. They had moved 3 warships into the station's approach corridor without warning at 0400 station time. There had been no declaration, no demands transmitted in advance. The Velthari simply came, and they fired 2 warning shots across the station's bow, and then they opened a channel and said one sentence. "This territory now belongs to the Dominion." The station's governor, a quiet man named Ori, who had run Haven for 11 years, had sent a distress call to Earth before the Velthari jammed communications. It lasted 30 seconds. It was enough. Hyun listened to the recording 3 times. He sat very still, with his hands folded on the table in front of him, and his face completely calm. Around him his senior staff waited. Nobody spoke. They all knew him well enough to know that the stillness was not inaction. It was the moment just before. When the 3rd playback ended, Hyun looked up. "Authorized deployment," he said. The room moved. Within 6 minutes, the order had gone out across the Seoul defense network to every ship, every crew, every commander who had been waiting. The message was simple, 3 lines long, and every person who received it had been expecting it for months. They had trained for it. They had drilled and planned and argued over every detail of it. There was no confusion, no delay, no panic. There was only the work. Admiral Isul received the order aboard the carrier Unyielding Resolve in the Europa shipyard. She was a compact woman with a quiet manner and a reputation in the fleet for never wasting a single word. She read the deployment order once, set it down, and pressed the ship-wide intercom. "All hands," she said. "This is the Admiral. We are moving. Stations." That was all she said. It was enough. The Europa fleet began to stir. Ships that had been dark and still in their berths lit up one by one as power came online across their systems. Engines warmed. Weapons ran their startup cycles. Fold drive cores, the drives that the Council had never seen, the ones built and tested in silence over 15 years, began their charge sequences. The sound of it, heard from inside the station, was like a low, constant hum that built slowly into something that you felt in your chest before you heard it with your ears. 4,216 ships. Not all of them came from Europa. The Titan yards launched their contingent 40 minutes later. Heavy cruisers and long-range destroyers. Ships built for endurance and deep operation. Ships that could hold position far from home for months without resupply. The assembly platforms between Jupiter and Saturn released their newest hulls, crews already aboard, already running final checks. From relay stations scattered across the outer Sol system, patrol fleets reformed into strike groups and oriented themselves outward. It took 11 hours for the full deployment to complete. In those 11 hours, the galaxy did not know what was happening. The Velthari did not know. The Council did not know. Human outgoing communications ran normally, diplomatic channels, commercial traffic, the usual background noise of a civilization going about its day. Nothing to see, nothing to report. Internally, across encrypted military channels, the largest coordinated military movement in human history was assembling in silence. Captain Teo was in command of the 7th Strike Group. 12 ships built around the carrier held line. He was 39 years old, calm-natured, and had a habit of walking slowly through his ship before any major operation. Not inspecting, just walking, nodding to his crew, letting them see him unhurried and steady. Down through the decks, past the weapons stations and the engine rooms, past the mess hall where his people were eating and talking quietly, past the medical bay, past the flight deck where the attack craft sat loaded and ready in their launch cradles. They looked at him as he passed. He looked back. Nobody said anything dramatic. Nobody needed to. They had trained together for years. They knew each other. They trusted each other. That was the thing about the human military that most of the galaxy had never understood. It was not built on fear or glory. It was built on people who trusted each other. When Teo returned to the bridge, his navigation officer looked up from her console. "Fold solution is plotted, Captain. All ships confirm ready." Teo sat down in his command chair. He pulled up the tactical display. On the screen, a wide field of red. Velthari forces around Haven Station. 3 warships visible. Intelligence suggested 2 more behind the boundary. The station itself showed as a white marker. Steady. Still standing. "How long has it been since first contact?" he asked. 14 hours, 20 minutes, his officer said. Teo nodded. "Any response from the station population?" "No communication. They're still jammed." He thought about that. 9,000 people sitting in the dark, not knowing if anyone was coming. He hoped they were holding on. He believed they were. People were usually tougher than the situations they found themselves in his experience. That was something he had always believed. "All right," he said quietly. Across the deployment, at precisely the same moment, 4,000 ships received the same signal. It was a single character, a go code, something that every commander and every crew member recognized immediately. The fold drives activated. The physics of a fold point entry were not gentle. From the outside, a ship entering fold looked like it was simply removed from existence. One moment present, the next gone. No transition visible to the naked eye. On the inside, the crew felt a deep pressure across their whole bodies for about 4 seconds, like the universe briefly pushed back, and then it released, and they were somewhere else entirely. 4,000 ships folded simultaneously. They did not arrive at the edge of the engagement zone. They did not approach from a distance and form up in standard battle lines. Human tactical doctrine, developed over years specifically for this moment, called for something the Velthari had never encountered in any war they had ever fought. They arrived inside the Velthari formation. The 5 Velthari warships in the Haven Station engagement zone had their sensors locked on the boundary, watching for incoming signatures at range, ready to engage at the long distances their weapons preferred, fully prepared for the kind of battle their doctrine expected. What their sensors showed instead, in one single moment that gave them no time to respond or adjust or even fully understand what was happening, was 4,000 human warships materializing around them at point-blank range. The Velthari flagship's captain had time to say 4 words on his command channel before the engagement began. Those 4 words, later recovered from the ship's logs, were translated as, "What is this?" The battle for Haven Station lasted 22 minutes. At the end of those 22 minutes, all 5 Velthari vessels had been disabled. Not destroyed, disabled. Their engines and weapons neutralized by precision strikes that Teo's gunners had drilled on simulations for 18 months. Haven Station's communications jamming ceased. The white marker on the tactical display flickered once, then stabilized. Teo sat in his command chair and looked at the display for a long moment. His bridge crew was quiet, not celebrating, just working, running damage assessments, coordinating with the other groups, tracking the broader picture as strike groups across the engagement zone reported in. Methodical, focused. "Get me a channel to the station," Teo said. His communications officer worked for a moment. "Channel open, Captain." Teo leaned forward. "Haven Station. This is Captain Teo of the Earth Carrier-held line. The engagement is over. You are safe. We are beginning evacuation assessment now. Please respond." There was static for a moment. Then a voice came through, rough, exhausted, clearly trying to hold itself together. "This is Governor Ori of Haven Station." A pause. "We thought no one was coming." Teo looked at the tactical display, at 4,000 ships holding position in the dark, at the disabled Velthari vessels being boarded by human marines for prisoner processing and medical assessment. "We were always coming," he said. "We just needed them to start it." The Galaxy Council mocked at cowards among us. Then the war commenced. Commander Hyun was not a man who raised his voice. In 26 years of military service, his subordinates had never once heard him shout. He did not need to. When Hyun spoke, people listened. Not because he was loud, but because he was always right. He had a way of seeing things clearly, of cutting through noise and landing on the exact truth of a situation that made other people want to be quiet and pay attention. He was sitting at his desk on the Sol Defense Command Station when Dane's shuttle docked. The station orbited Earth at a high altitude, far enough out that the planet below looked like a blue coin through the viewport. Hyun had a cup of cold coffee he had forgotten to drink, a stack of reports he had already read twice, and a face that gave nothing away. Dane walked in, set his datapad on the desk, and sat down across from him. They looked at each other for a moment. 38 against, Dane said. Hyun nodded slowly. How did Mira take it? She laughed. Dane paused. Then everyone laughed. Hyun was quiet for a long time. He picked up his cold coffee, looked at it, put it back down. Good, he said finally. Dane had expected that. You wanted them to say no. I wanted them to say no loudly, Hyun said, and publicly, and on the record. He stood up and walked to the viewport. Below them, Earth turned slowly. Every time we go to that council and they turn us away, they tell the Velthari something. They tell them that no one is coming, that we are alone, that we are soft. He put one hand against the cold glass. Let them believe that for a little while longer. He turned and looked at Dane. Come with me. There's something I want you to see. They took a secure transit pod down through the station's lower levels, past the operations decks and the logistics floors. past the places that were on official maps and the places that were not. Hyun used a keycard at 3 separate checkpoints. The last door they went through opened into a long briefing room with a wide display wall covering the entire far end. Lieutenant Yuna was already there. She was younger than Dane by about 10 years, with sharp eyes and the kind of posture that meant she had spent a lot of time in zero gravity. She was the head analyst of the 3rd Rapid Fleet Planning Division, which was a title that told you almost nothing about what she actually did. What she actually did was know everything. She nodded at Dane as he came in, then pulled up the display. Sol at the center, the Kepler boundary as a faint curved line, the Velthari Dominion in red, spreading across a wide section of the outer territories like a slow bruise. And overlaid on top of all of it, in a color that had no official name but looked something like deep amber, were the positions of human assets. Dane stared at the map. He had seen parts of it before, not all of it. "This is everything?" he asked. "This is everything registered," Yuna said. "The number you are not supposed to know yet is larger." She tapped the display, and the amber markers multiplied. Dane counted for a moment, then stopped counting, because counting stopped being useful. The shipyards of Europa were not on any public registry. They had been built in stages over 30 years, each stage approved quietly, each budget item buried inside larger infrastructure proposals. The dry docks of Titan were listed officially as commercial freight construction facilities. The 3 deep space assembly platforms between Jupiter and Saturn did not exist on any document the Council had ever seen. Humans had been building. They had been building for a very long time, and they had been building quietly, because they understood something that most other species in the galaxy did not seem to grasp. The galaxy was not safe. It had never been safe. The Verith Accord was a piece of paper that powerful civilizations followed when it was convenient and ignored when it was not. The Council would not save them. The Council had proven that again and again over 3 centuries. So they had prepared themselves. Not loudly, not with announcements or demonstrations or military parades. Humans did not do that. They put their heads down, and they worked, and they planned, and they tested, and they built, and then they built some more. Yuna walked Dane through the numbers slowly, letting each one land. 4,216 active warships. Not the small patrol vessels or the escort frigates that were registered with the Council. Real warships, heavy cruisers, carrier platforms. Long-range destroyers built for deep penetration operations with fold drives that had been developed in secret over 15 years and tested in the empty space beyond the Oort cloud, where no one was watching. 39 ground forces divisions, fully equipped and trained, ready for rapid deployment. 12 experimental weapons platforms that had never been shown to anyone outside Sol. And behind all of it, something that the Council had dismissed entirely: the human habit of studying. Every alien species that humanity had ever encountered, they had watched carefully. Every conflict in the galaxy for 200 years, human analysts had documented. Every weapon system, every tactical pattern, every known weakness of every known enemy. Yuna had a file on the Velthari Dominion that was longer than most species' entire military histories. "They have never fought an enemy that uses full point entry," Yuna said, pulling up the Velthari tactical records. "Their battle doctrine assumes linear engagement at range. They maneuver to create distance, and then they bombard." She overlaid human fleet positioning. They have never had to think about an enemy appearing inside their lines. Dane looked at the display for a long time. "When did you start planning this?" "Seriously? About 12 years ago, in general terms." Yuna glanced at Hyun. "Ask someone older than me." Hyun had been standing quietly near the back of the room, watching Dane take it all in. "We started planning the day the first Velthari fleet crossed into free space," he said. 20 years ago. We went to the Council then too. They said the same things they always say." He walked forward slowly. We made a decision then. If the council would not protect us, we would protect ourselves. And if we had to do it alone, we would make absolutely sure we could do it well. He stopped beside Dane and looked at the map. The amber markers glowed across the display. 4,000 ships, ready and waiting. Crews trained. Commanders prepared. Everything positioned and pointed in the right direction. All they needed was a reason. "The Velthari will give us that reason," Hyun said. "They always do. They think we are weak. They think the Council's opinion of us is the truth." He looked at the Velthari territory and read, on the map, spreading and growing. "Let them think it a little longer." Dane nodded. He understood now. The reply he had sent Hyun, "I know, good," had not been strange at all. The rejection had been the plan. Every time the Council turned them away, it gave humanity more time. Every laugh, every dismissal, every cruel word about softlings and cowards was another day the Velthari spent not preparing for what was actually coming. "How long?" Dane asked. Yuna pulled up a timeline. At their current rate of expansion, the Velthari reach Haven Station in approximately 4 months. "And Haven Station is the line," Hyun said quietly. It was not a question. "Haven Station is the line," Yuna confirmed. The room was silent for a moment. The map glowed in the dim light. 4,000 ships sat in the dark, patient and ready, waiting for the moment that everyone in that room already knew was coming. Dane thought about the counselor's laughter. He thought about the word coward and what it actually meant to people who had never had to choose between mercy and survival, between doing the right thing and doing the easy thing. He thought about the humans who had built those ships with their hands and their years, and their stubborn, quiet, furious love for something worth protecting. He was not afraid. The Galaxy Council mocked at cowards among us. Then the war commenced. The station of Varath Prime floated at the edge of the Kepler boundary like a small metal moon. It had been built 300 years ago by the Orenthi Empire as a place where civilizations could talk instead of fight. 52 species had signed the Varath Accord. They had agreed to meet here whenever the galaxy needed a decision. It was supposed to be a place of peace. It was supposed to be fair. Dane had heard that before. He had read about it in school, seen it painted on murals back home on Earth. He believed it once, when he was young. He did not believe it anymore. He stood at the center of the Grand Council chamber, a wide circular room with high curved walls, and rows of seats rising in tiers all around him. Alien delegates, from 50 species, looked down at him from above. Some with 4 eyes, some with none, some breathing through filters attached to their necks, some sitting inside sealed tanks of liquid. They were all different, but right now, they were all looking at him the same way, like he was something small. Dane was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with short dark hair and a calm face that did not give much away. He wore the deep blue uniform of the Earth Diplomatic Corps. No medals, no decorations. Humans did not wear those to council meetings. He carried only a datapad and a prepared speech that he had worked on for 3 weeks. He cleared his throat and began. "Honored delegates," he said, his voice steady. "I stand before this council on behalf of the United Earth Government and the people of the Sol system. I come with a formal request for collective military assistance under Article 9 of the Varath Accord." A low murmur moved through the chamber. Article 9 had not been invoked in over a century. Dane continued. "The Velthari Dominion has crossed the outer boundary markers of free space 4 times in the last 18 months. They have destroyed 2 unmanned research outposts. They have fired on a passenger transport near the Arna Belt, killing 31 civilians. And 3 weeks ago, they occupied the independent colony of Briva Station by force, imprisoning its population of 12,000. He paused, letting the numbers sit in the air. We are asking this council to recognize these actions as violations of galactic law, and to authorize a joint response force. For a moment, the chamber was quiet. Dane thought, just for a second, that maybe this time it would be different. That maybe this time they would listen. Then Councillor Mira spoke. She represented the Arenthi Empire, the oldest and most powerful civilization in the council. She was tall, pale-skinned, with long fingers and cold eyes the color of ash. When she spoke, others listened. When she laughed, others followed. She laughed now. It started as a short sound, almost polite, like she was trying to hold it back. But she did not hold it back for long. She leaned forward in her seat, looked down at Dane, and let the laugh come out fully. Around her, other delegates joined in. The Thurak representative clicked his mandibles together in what his species used for amusement. The Pelori delegate covered his mouth, but his shoulders shook. Even the Dravani, who rarely showed any expression at all, let out a slow exhale that their translator rendered as a dry chuckle. Dane stood still. He did not move. He did not speak. He just waited. Mira finally composed herself enough to speak. "Forgive me," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "I mean no offense to the human delegate." She paused. "But I must ask, is this the same humanity that refused to deploy orbital bombardment during the Breva conflict because there were civilians in the impact zone?" "Yes," Dane said simply. "The same humanity that, after the attack on the Arnabelt transport, sent a medical vessel to assist Velthari survivors alongside its own?" "Yes." "The same humanity that has never, in 300 years of space travel, destroyed a single inhabited world, even in retaliation?" "Yes." Mira spread her hands wide. "Then what exactly are you asking us to help you fight with? Compassion?" More laughter, louder this time. "You are a species that cries over its dead. You hold funerals for enemy soldiers. You have laws against cruelty and war. You send aid packages to the people of worlds that fired on your ships." She shook her head slowly. "With the greatest respect, Delegate Dane, humanity is not a warrior civilization. You are administrators, caregivers. You are kind people." She said the word kind the way someone might say useless. "The Velthari will not stop because you ask them nicely." Dane looked up at her. "I am not asking them. I am asking you." "And I am telling you," Mira replied, her voice now flat and final, "that this council does not send its fleets to protect those who will not protect themselves. You have had 3 centuries to build a military capable of standing against a power like the Velthari. You chose instead to build hospitals, schools, relief organizations." She gestured broadly at the chamber. "We are not unsympathetic, but we cannot save a civilization from its own choices." The vote was quick. 38 against, 9 abstaining, 5 in favor. And those 5 were the smallest, weakest members of the council, the ones who feared the Velthari themselves, and hoped someone else might do something about it. No assistance would be given. Dane stood there for a moment after the result was announced. The chamber was already moving on. Delegates were talking among themselves, pulling up their next agenda items, pouring drinks. He had been dismissed before he even walked out the door. He picked up his datapad. He turned and walked toward the exit without a word. One of the junior Arenthi aides, a young diplomat who could not have been more than 20 years old by human standards, called out after him as he reached the door. "Don't feel bad," the aide said, not unkindly. "Not every species is built for this kind of galaxy. There is no shame in being peaceful." He stood in the doorway for a second, his back to the chamber. "We are not peaceful," he said quietly, without turning around. "We are patient." Then he walked out. The door closed behind him. The chamber moved on. The council forgot about humanity within the hour, the way you forget about something small that does not seem important yet. Back on Earth, a message was already waiting. Dane read it on the shuttle home. It was short. It was from Commander Hyun. It said only 4 words. They said no again. Dane typed back just 3. I know. Good. He put the datapad down, leaned his head back against the seat, and closed his eyes. Outside the viewport, the stars were very bright and very far away. He thought about the shipyards on Europa. He thought about the dry docks on Titan. He thought about 30 years of quiet, careful, invisible work. And he thought about patience. And for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself a small, private smile.